Her name was Sonia, and I hurt her in a way that was specific and avoidable and that I have thought about, in varying degrees of clarity, for the better part of 7 years. The thought does not visit on a schedule. It comes when something in the present situation rhymes with the structure of what happened, when I am watching someone else handle a moment of conflict, or when I am in a conversation that requires the kind of honesty I did not give her, or sometimes simply at night, in the interval between waking and sleep when the mind produces without filter whatever it has been storing. The thing I did was not dramatic. There is no version of telling this story in which the act itself sounds proportionate to the years of aftermath. What I did was this: she had submitted work to a program we were both part of, and she had submitted it with the understanding that I had reviewed it and found it ready. I had not reviewed it carefully. I had glanced at it, found it adequate in the parts one looked at, and said it was fine without completing the review. The submission was rejected, publicly, with feedback that identified specific problems in exactly the sections I had not examined. The rejection set back her work by 8 months and introduced a formal note into her record with the program that she had to subsequently navigate. She knew I had not reviewed it properly. She did not say so directly, but she knew, and I knew she knew, and for a brief window of perhaps 2 weeks after the rejection this knowledge sat between us, visible to both of us, waiting for me to acknowledge it. I did not acknowledge it. I expressed sympathy for the rejection. I helped her strategize about the resubmission. I was present and useful and attentive in every way except the one that mattered, which was naming what I had done and taking direct responsibility for the part of the outcome that was mine. The window closed. She left the program 8 months later, for reasons that were not entirely related to what had happened but were not unrelated either. We stayed in contact for another year, less frequently, and then not at all. I did not tell her what I should have told her during those 2 weeks, and I have not told her since. The apology I owe her is specific. It names the thing I did, the incomplete review, the confident assurance I had no business giving, the silence in the aftermath when naming it would have cost me something but given her something more valuable. It does not hide behind the ambient sympathy I offered during the resubmission period, which was real but was also, I understand now, functioning as a substitute. I was being helpful in ways that did not require me to be accountable. Helpfulness, in that period, was doing the work of the apology without carrying its honesty. It made me feel like I was addressing the situation while not actually addressing it. The cost of not delivering the apology has not been abstract. Sonia's cost was the 8 months, the formal note, possibly the departure from the program, though I cannot claim full causation there, and overclaiming would be its own kind of self-indulgence. My cost has been subtler and less deserved of attention, but I am going to name it because it is what I actually know from the inside. The cost to me has been a particular kind of recurring discomfort that has never fully resolved because it has never been addressed. Not guilt in the overwhelming sense. More like a low-grade infection, something that is not actively acute but is not healed either, that flares under certain conditions, that occupies space in the background of consciousness in a way that requires ongoing management. I have constructed, over the years, a number of arguments for why delivering the apology now would not be appropriate. Too much time has passed and reintroducing it would disturb a silence she may have found useful. The apology would be more for me than for her, a way of resolving my own discomfort rather than genuinely serving her. I don't know how she feels about any of it now, and it would be presumptuous to assume she is still carrying it. These arguments are not entirely without merit. But I also know that I have used them in the same way I have used other convenient arguments at other moments in my life, to arrive at a conclusion that happens to require me to do nothing uncomfortable. What the apology would actually require is the admission, direct and unambiguous, that my carelessness had a cost and that I knew it and did not say so when it would have mattered most. That admission would mean releasing the version of events in which I was simply a sympathetic bystander to a bad outcome, and accepting the version in which I was a cause. These are different positions to occupy. The bystander version is easier to live in. I have been living in it, largely, for 7 years. What I understand now about apologies, and what I did not understand then, or understood only theoretically, is that they are not primarily transactional. I had been thinking about the apology as a product, something I would deliver, something she would receive, something that would have a specific outcome that I needed to be able to predict before I could decide whether to offer it. Would it help her? Would it make things worse? Would it reopen something she had closed? These were real questions, but I was also using them as a requirement, insisting on certainty about the outcome before I would take the action. And certainty about the outcome of an apology is not available. The apology is not a transaction with a guaranteed return. It is an act of acknowledgement that does not depend on the response it receives to be the right thing. I held myself to an impossible standard of predicted benefit and used that standard as a reason not to act. This is a pattern I have recognized elsewhere in my life, in other situations where the right action carried uncertainty about its reception. The uncertainty was real. But I used the uncertainty as an excuse in a way that was not honest, because what I was actually afraid of was not the wrong outcome for her. I was afraid of the moment of direct admission. I was afraid of having to say, without softening, without the sympathy as substitute, I did not do what I said I would do, and the outcome was partly mine. That moment has not happened. It may not happen. I have not found the opening, or have not looked for the opening with the seriousness it deserves. What I know is that the non-delivery is not neutral. It is not simply an absence. It is a choice that I make again each time the occasion passes, and I let it pass. The weight of it is not punishing, but it is real, and it belongs in the ledger of things I have done and not done, and it is not going to lead that ledger through anything other than the act it is waiting for. Sonia built something significant in the years after the program. I know this through mutual connections, through the digital visibility of professional life. She recovered completely from whatever the rejection cost her. This is the fact I use to tell myself the apology is not necessary, which is also the most convenient fact available and therefore the one I should trust least. The recovery does not dissolve the original debt. It only means that the debt would be settled late, which is different from it not being owed. What I owe her is the direct sentence. The sentence that begins with I, that contains the specific action and the specific acknowledgement, that does not soften the middle with explanations about my state of mind at the time. The explanations might be true. They are not the apology. The apology is the sentence that takes responsibility cleanly and completely and does not ask anything of her in return. I know what it sounds like. I know exactly how it would go. The only thing I have not done is said it. Here is what I carry forward from this, and what I hope might be useful if you recognize any part of your own story in mine. The pattern I described does not operate because we are careless or unintelligent or unaware. It operates because it has a function, because it is doing something for us that we have not found another way to do. Staying in the wrong situation, staying silent when we should speak, not walking away when the door is right there, all of these behaviors persist because they are solving something, even if imperfectly. They are providing some version of comfort or protection or identity that we have not yet found a better way to provide. Understanding that function is the first move. Not judging the behavior, but asking honestly, what is this doing for me? What would I have to give up if I stopped? What am I afraid will happen if I make the change I know I need to make? Those questions do not dissolve the pattern automatically. But they make it visible in a new way. And visibility changes the relationship to the thing. When you can see what something is doing, you can start to choose whether you want it to keep doing it. The change that followed was not easier because I understood the mechanism. It was the same difficulty. But I went into it knowing what I was moving through rather than being entirely inside it without perspective. That perspective is what I want to pass on here. Not the specific story. The structure. The shape of how we stay in things longer than we should, how we look away from things we can see, how we tell ourselves the thing will change without giving it a mechanism for changing. You are not alone in this. It is not a character flaw. It is how the human nervous system manages uncertainty and fear. But you can do something different. The doing starts with the looking. Look at it. Directly. Honestly. Without the story that makes it easier to carry. And then decide what you want to do with what you see. That decision, fully conscious and fully yours, is the only kind that actually changes anything. There is also something I want to say about the specific moment of turning toward rather than away, the moment when you actually do the thing you have been not doing. Because that moment has a texture that I was not prepared for, and that I think is worth naming so you know what to expect when you reach it. It does not feel like relief. Not at first. The moment of change, of finally having the conversation, or walking away, or saying the thing, or making the decision, often feels worse before it feels better. There is a period of acute discomfort in which the old equilibrium has been disturbed but the new one has not yet settled. You have stopped managing the avoidance, which means the thing you were avoiding is now fully present, no longer softened by distance. That period is real and it is temporary. I want to say both of those things with equal emphasis. It is real. Do not be surprised by it, do not mistake it for evidence that you made the wrong choice. And it is temporary, it has a duration, and that duration is almost always shorter than the years of management that preceded it. The other side of that period is different. Not perfect, change does not produce perfection. But different in the specific way of someone who has stopped spending energy on maintaining something and can now spend that energy somewhere else. The ambient cost disappears. The weight that you had normalized as simply the weight of life turns out to have been specific and removable. I have felt that release more than once. Each time it is instructive about how much I had been carrying that I didn't know I was carrying. You probably know what you're carrying. You just haven't decided to put it down yet. When you decide, it will be hard first and better after. That is almost always the order of things. And the better, when it arrives, is real. What I notice now, in the life I have after the story I told here, is a kind of attentiveness I didn't have before. Not anxiety, that's different. Anxiety is looking for the thing that might go wrong. What I have is more like a quiet, ongoing check-in. Am I here because I want to be? Am I saying what I actually think? Am I moving toward what matters or managing around something I haven't named? These questions don't produce constant disruption. Most of the time the answer is, yes, I am where I want to be, saying what I think, moving in the right direction. The check-in confirms what I thought. And that confirmation is itself valuable, it builds a different relationship with my own choices. They feel more like choices and less like things happening to me. On the occasions when the answer is different, when the check-in reveals an avoidance or a suppression or a staying too long, I try to act on the information faster than I used to. Not immediately, not impulsively. But without the elaborate deferral structure. Without the "I'll address this when the conditions are better." The conditions will not be better. They will be different. Different is workable. Better is a fiction. I am the only condition that changes. And I change through the practice of looking and then acting on what I see. That's the whole thing. The looking and the acting. Over and over. For as long as it takes. Which is your whole life. But a whole life spent actually inside it is worth more than a whole life spent at the edge of it, managing the view. I know which one I want. I think you do too.